How does your garden grow? Hercule Poirot gathered all the letters he had received into a neat stack and placed them before him. Taking the top one, he studied the address closely, then carefully opened the envelope with a paper knife that lay on the table specifically for that purpose. Inside was another envelope on which was neatly written, "Private and confidential." This second envelope was securely sealed with red sealing wax. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Patience. Nous allons arriver," he murmured, and once again put the knife to work. This time he extracted a letter written in an angular, erratic hand. Many of the words were heavily underlined. Poirot began to read. At the top, it said once more, "Private and confidential." To the right was the address, Rosebank, Charmans Green, Buckinghamshire, and the date, the 21st of March. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I was recommended to contact you by an old and dear friend who knows the state of anxiety and distress I've been in lately. My friend, of course, is not aware of all my circumstances. I keep them entirely to myself, as it is a strictly personal matter. He assured me that you are the embodiment of discretion and caution, and that even if my fears are confirmed, I need not fear police intervention, which would be most undesirable. Furthermore, it is quite possible that I am mistaken after all. Lately, I have been unable to think with sufficient composure, a result of insomnia and an illness last winter, to investigate everything on my own. I have neither the opportunity nor the skill. On the other hand, I repeat, this is an extremely delicate matter, and there are many reasons that compel me to keep everything secret. If the facts are confirmed, I should prefer to deal with the matter personally. I hope I have managed to express myself clearly enough. If you undertake the investigation, please inform me at the above address. Sincerely yours, Amelia Barrowby. Poirot read the letter carefully once more. Again his eyebrows rose slightly. At last, he set the letter aside and took the next one from the stack before him. At exactly 10 o'clock, Poirot entered the room where Miss Lemon, his private secretary, awaited her morning instructions. Miss Lemon was 48 years old and was by no means attractive. She seemed to consist of a multitude of bones, put together hastily and at random. Miss Lemon's passion for order was almost as great as Poirot's own. She possessed a searching and keen mind, but she never exerted it without a specific instruction to do so. Poirot handed Miss Lemon the morning correspondence. "Be so kind, mademoiselle, as to reply to all these letters with a refusal, naturally in a polite form." Miss Lemon glanced quickly through the letters, marking each with a corresponding symbol. This was her own code, understood only by her: flatter slightly, give a slap, purr, short and sharp, and so on. Having finished, Miss Lemon nodded and looked up, awaiting further orders. Poirot handed her Amelia Barrowby's letter. Miss Lemon extracted it from the double envelope, read it, and looked at her chief questioningly. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot." Her pencil hovered expectantly over her notepad. "What do you think of this letter, Miss Lemon?" Frowning slightly, Miss Lemon set aside her pencil and reread the letter. The problems described in it did not interest her in the least. Knowing its contents was necessary only to respond appropriately. Miss Lemon's chief rarely asked for her personal opinion. Such requests annoyed her, for she was an almost perfect machine, completely devoid of interest in anyone's sorrows or griefs. The only true passion in Miss Lemon's life was the perfection of a filing system. She dreamed of inventing one that would cause all existing systems to vanish into oblivion. This miracle appeared to her in her dreams at night. However, Hercule Poirot knew that Miss Lemon was capable of understanding purely human problems. "Well," he said insistently. "The old lady," said Miss Lemon, "has clearly got the wind up." And in which direction is the wind blowing her?" Miss Lemon, assuming that Poirot had lived in Great Britain long enough to understand this now common expression, did not reply. "It is all hints," she said, glancing at the double envelope, "and no real information of any substance." "Yes, I have noted that myself," Poirot agreed. Miss Lemon's hand rested once more on her notepad with hope. This time, Poirot fulfilled her expectations. "Miss Lemon," he said, "please inform Miss Barrowby that I should be honored to visit her at any time convenient for her, unless, of course, she would prefer to come to me herself. Do not type the letter. Write it by hand." "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. And these are the bills." Hercule Poirot handed over several more letters. Miss Lemon's deft hands quickly sorted the remaining mail. "I shall pay all except these two," she said. "Why those two in particular? They seem correct to me. These are bills from firms with which you have only just begun to deal. If you hasten to pay a bill the moment you open an account, you may be misunderstood. They might think, for example, that you are anxious to establish a long-term credit. My admiration for your knowledge of the psychology of British tradesmen is immense. Yes, there is very little about them that I do not know," Miss Lemon confirmed drily. The letter to Miss Barrowby was duly written and dispatched, but no reply followed. Perhaps, Poirot thought, the old lady has cleared up her mystery herself. He was, however, slightly surprised that she had not seen fit to notify him that his services were no longer required. 5 days passed, and Miss Lemon, having received her usual morning instructions from Poirot, said unexpectedly, "That Miss Barrowby we wrote to, it's no wonder she hasn't replied. She is dead." "Dead?" Poirot murmured softly. It sounded more like a statement than a question. Opening her handbag, Miss Lemon extracted a newspaper clipping. "I saw this in the tube and tore it out." Although Miss Lemon used the word tore, Poirot noted with inward approval that she had, in fact, neatly cut out the notice. It was a message from the births, marriages, and deaths column of the Morning Post. March the 26th, suddenly, at Rosebank, Charman's Green, Amelia Jane Barrowby, in her 73rd year. No flowers by request. Poirot reread the notice. Suddenly, he murmured again, and then, turning to Miss Lemon, said, "Be so kind, mademoiselle, as to write a letter." Miss Lemon's pencil hovered expectantly. Even though her thoughts were concentrated on the further improvement of her famous filing system, she took the shorthand quickly and precisely. "Dear Miss Barrowby, I have unfortunately received no reply to my letter, but as I shall be near Charman's Green this Friday, I shall call upon you to discuss the matter mentioned in your letter. Yours truly," and so forth. Please type that, Miss Lemon. If the letter is posted immediately, it will be in Charman's Green by this evening. The next morning, with the second post, a letter arrived in an envelope with a mourning border. "Dear Sir, in reply to your letter, I am writing to inform you that my aunt, Miss Barrowby, passed away on March the 26th, so the matter to which you refer is now of no importance. Sincerely yours, Mary Delafontaine." Of no more importance, Poirot smiled. "Well, that remains to be seen. Avant, to Charman's Green." Rosebank was, perhaps, well named, which is more than can be said for many houses or estates. As he walked toward the front door, Hercule Poirot paused for a moment, looking with approval at the neatly laid-out flower-beds on either side of the path. The roses were almost ready for their full bloom, for now there were pale yellow daffodils, early tulips, and blue hyacinths. The edge of the last flower bed was partially bordered with shells. In Poirot's mind, the nursery rhyme began to chime. The one about a certain Mary, in whose garden grow silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. Well, Poirot mused aloud. There may be no pretty maids in a row, but there's at least one pretty maid at the door, so the rhyme was not recalled in vain. On the threshold of the open front door stood a neat, small-statured maid in a cap and apron. She was watching with astonishment the strange sight of a man, obviously a foreigner, with enormous mustaches, talking loudly to himself in the middle of the garden. The maid was indeed very pretty, with round blue eyes and rosy cheeks. Poirot politely raised his hat. "Pardon, does Miss Amelia Barrowby live here?" The maid was struck dumb for a moment. Her eyes grew even rounder. "Oh, sir, haven't you heard? Miss Barrowby is dead. It happened so suddenly. Late Tuesday night." She hesitated, torn between two conflicting feelings, a natural distrust of a foreigner and the typical servant's desire to relish the details of a recent illness or death. "You don't say?" Poirot replied with an air of mild, if not entirely sincere, surprise. "I had an appointment with a lady for today, but perhaps I could see someone else who lives here." The maid was unsure. "The mistress? I suppose you might, though I don't know if she'll be receiving anyone." "She will receive me," said Poirot, and handed her his card. Poirot's confident tone had its effect. The rosy-cheeked maid stepped back, ushering him into the house, and after showing him into the drawing-room, went to take the card to her mistress. Hercule Poirot glanced around the room. It was quite traditional. Pale oatmeal-colored wallpaper with a border at the top, furniture covered in a cretonne of an indefinite pattern, pink cushions and curtains, and a multitude of knickknacks and ornaments. There was nothing in this room that drew the eye or spoke of its owners. Suddenly, Poirot felt he was being watched. He turned sharply. Standing in the opening of the glass door that led to the garden was a girl, short, with a pale face and very black hair, watching him with a suspicious gaze. She entered the room and, as Poirot bowed, asked with unexpected sharpness, "Why have you come?" Poirot said nothing. He only raised his eyebrows slightly. "You're not a lawyer?" "No." She spoke English well, but no one would ever have taken her for an Englishwoman. "Why should I be a lawyer, mademoiselle?" The girl stared at him gloomily. "I thought you were a lawyer. I thought you were going to say she didn't know what she was doing. I have heard of such things. Undue influence. That is the phrase, is it not? But it is not true. She wanted the money to go to me, and I shall have it. If I must, I will hire a lawyer myself. The money is mine. That is what she wrote, and that is how it shall be." Her face was distorted with anger, her eyes flashing. Just then, the door from the hallway opened, and a tall woman entered. "Katrina," she said quietly. The girl seemed to shrink instantly. Her cheeks burned, and murmuring something, she hurried out into the garden. Poirot turned to the woman who had so effectively taken control of the situation with a single word. In her voice, there was confidence, a touch of disdain, and that slight irony common to well-bred ladies. Poirot realized he was facing the mistress of the house, Mary Delafontaine. "Monsieur Poirot, I wrote to you. You did not receive my letter, perhaps? Alas, I was away from London." "Oh, I see. Well, let me introduce myself. I am Mary Delafontaine, and this is my husband. Miss Barrowby was my aunt." Mr. Delafontaine had entered so quietly that Poirot had not even noticed his arrival. He was a tall man with heavily graying hair and hesitant manners. He had a habit of nervously fingering his chin. He glanced frequently at his wife, and, by all appearances, occupied a subordinate position. "I am very sorry," said Poirot, "to intrude at a time of such grief." "Not at all. I understand it was not your fault," Mrs. Delafontaine assured him politely. "My aunt died on Tuesday evening. It was quite unexpected." "Most unexpected," added Mr. Delafontaine. "Quite a shock." His gaze was fixed on the glass door through which the girl had vanished. "I offer my apologies and shall take my leave," said Poirot, stepping toward the door. "One moment." Mr. Delafontaine stopped him. You said you had an appointment with Aunt Amelia?" "That is correct." "Perhaps you could tell us the purpose of your visit?" His wife chimed in. "If there is anything we can do to help." The matter was strictly personal, Poirot replied evasively. "I am a detective," he added briefly. Mr. Delafontaine dropped a porcelain figurine he had been holding. "A detective?" Mrs. Delafontaine asked in astonishment. "And you had an appointment with my aunt? How very strange." She looked at him intently. "Could you tell us a little more, Monsieur Poirot?" It is quite incredible. I am in a difficult position, madam," he replied, choosing his words with care. "I hardly know how to proceed." "Listen." Mr. Delafontaine spoke up again. "She didn't happen to mention Russians?" "Russians?" "Yes. Bolsheviks, Reds, that sort of thing. You understand?" "That is absurd, Henry," said his wife. Mr. Delafontaine instantly subsided. Sorry. I only wanted to know." Mary Delafontaine continued to stare fixedly at Poirot. Her eyes were as blue as forget-me-nots. "If you can tell us anything, Monsieur Poirot, I should be very grateful. I assure you, I do not ask out of idle curiosity." Her husband looked at her with anxiety. "Careful, my dear. Perhaps there is nothing to tell." She stopped him again with a sharp glance. "Well, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot slowly shook his head, with visible regret, but firmly. "At the present moment, madam, I fear I must say nothing." He bowed, took his hat, and moved toward the exit. Mary Delafontaine followed him into the hall. Poirot paused on the threshold. "You are very fond of your garden, I think, madam." Yes, I do everything here myself. Je vous fais mes compliments." With another bow, Poirot strode toward the gate. Once in the street, he turned right, looked back, and noticed a pale face in a second-story window. On the opposite side of the road, at that very moment, a gentleman with a military bearing was strolling by. "There is definitely a mouse hiding in that hole," Hercule Poirot noted to himself. "The question is, what will be the cat's next move?" After a moment's thought, Poirot went to the nearest post office to make a telephone call. The resulting conversation seemed to satisfy him. He then headed to the Charmans Green police station and asked for Inspector Sims. The inspector turned out to be a large, stout man with an affable and easy manner. "Monsieur Poirot?" he asked. "I thought as much. The chief constable just rang me to say you might be dropping in." Come in." Closing the door behind him, the inspector gestured for Poirot to sit, took a seat opposite him, and looked at his visitor searchingly. "You don't waste time, Monsieur Poirot. You've come about the Rosebank case almost before we knew there was a case at all. What put you on the scent?" Poirot took out the letter he had received from Miss Barrowby and handed it to the inspector. The latter read it with interest. "Curious," he said. "The trouble is, it could mean anything. It's a pity she didn't make herself a bit clearer. It would have helped us a great deal. Or perhaps no help would have been needed at all." "How so?" "She might be alive today." "Do you really think so?" "Well, perhaps you're right." "Please, Inspector, tell me what you know. I am completely in the dark so far." "Well, then, the old lady was taken ill on Tuesday evening after dinner. Convulsions, spasms, that sort of thing. Everyone was terrified. They sent for the doctor, but before he could arrive, she was dead." ostensibly from a stroke. The doctor, however, was clearly not satisfied with that explanation. He hesitated, muttered a few vague things, and eventually stated he could not issue a death certificate. So, the relatives are now waiting for the autopsy results. We got a bit ahead of them, though. The doctor hinted. He performed the autopsy with a police surgeon, that there's no room for doubt. The old lady died from a massive dose of strychnine. Uh-huh, precisely. So now we have a real puzzle on our hands. The question is, who did it? At first, we thought the strychnine was put in the dinner, but frankly, it doesn't look like it. They all ate artichoke soup served from a tureen, baked fish, and apple tart. They being who? Miss Barrowby, Mrs. Delafontaine, and Mr. Delafontaine. There is also a girl living with Miss Barrowby, half Russian, something between a maid, a nurse, and a companion, but she didn't eat at the table with them. She usually had what was brought from the dining room after the family had finished. There is another maid in the house, but Tuesday was her night off. She left the soup on the stove and the fish in the oven. The apple tart was served cold. All three ate the same things. Besides, it's impossible to put strychnine in those dishes. It's as bitter as gall. The doctor says you can taste it even in a proportion of 1 to 1,000. Coffee? That would be more likely, but the old lady never drank coffee. The difficulties are indeed considerable. Did she drink anything during the meal? Water. That makes it no easier. A bit of a problem, isn't it? Was the old lady wealthy? I believe she was quite well off. We don't have the details yet, but as I understand it, the Delafontaines are rather short of money. The old lady helped them keep up the house. So, Poirot smiled slightly. You suspect the Delafontaines. Which one? I can't say I suspect anyone in particular yet. The fact remains, they're the only near relatives, and I don't doubt they'll inherit a tidy sum. And human nature, as they say, is sometimes far from being human, Poirot finished. Yes, you're right. Tell me, besides what you've mentioned, did the old lady eat or drink anything else? Well, you see. Ah, voila. I felt you were keeping something in reserve. Soup, fish, apple tart. Such a bêtise. Now we come to the most important part. I don't know about that, but the truth is, the old lady took a powder before her meal. Not a pill or a tablet, you understand, but a powder wrapped in rice paper. Perfectly harmless stuff taken for digestion. Excellent. Nothing is easier than to put strychnine in one of those powders. It is swallowed with a draught of water without ever touching the palate. True enough, but the snag is that the powder was given to her by the girl. The Russian girl? Yes, Katrina Reiger. As I understand it, Miss Barrowby led her a dog's life. Fetch this, fetch that, bring me this, rub my back, pour my medicine, run to the chemist's. And all that. You know how it is with these old ladies. They want to appear so kind-hearted, but in reality, they are worse than any tyrant. Poirot smiled. However, Inspector Sims continued, there is a snag there too. Why should she kill the old lady? Now she's out of job, and finding work is no easy matter. She hasn't any real qualifications, you see. But if the strychnine was added by someone else, Poirot suggested, surely the opportunity was open to anyone. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, we are working through every possibility, and as you can imagine, we are trying to do everything without making a stir. When was the last prescription filled? Where was it usually kept? Patience and painstaking work will lead us to the finish in the end. Then, there is Miss Barrowby's lawyer. I have an appointment with him tomorrow. And the bank manager as well. Plenty to do, as you see. Poirot rose. I have a request, Mr. Sims. Please keep me informed of how the investigation proceeds. I should be most grateful. Why, of course, Monsieur Poirot. Two heads are better than one. Besides, I was going to ask you to join in the investigation myself. After all, it was you who received that letter from her. Most kind of you." Shaking the inspector's hand, Poirot departed. Late the following afternoon, the telephone rang in Poirot's flat. "Is that Monsieur Poirot?" "Inspector Sims speaking. Things are beginning to shape up." "Indeed? I'm all ears." "Well then, point number one, and perhaps the most important. Miss Barrowby left her niece only a very small sum and bequeathed everything else to Katrina, in consideration of her kindness and attention." That's exactly how it's written, and that changes the whole complexion of the case. Immediately, Poirot envisioned that somber face and agitated voice. "The money is mine. She wrote it so, and so it shall be." Evidently, the inheritance had not come as a surprise to Katrina. The girl had known about it beforehand. Point number two, Inspector Sims' voice continued over the line. "No one but Katrina touched those powders." "You're sure of that?" "The girl doesn't deny it herself." "Well, what do you think of that?" "Extremely interesting. We only want to know one thing now, where she got the strychnine. I don't think that will be difficult to find out." "But so far you haven't succeeded?" "I've only just started. The inquest was this morning." "And the result?" "Adjourned for a week." "And the young lady, Katrina?" "Detained on suspicion of murder." "I'm not taking any chances. She might have friends we don't know about who would try to help her disappear." "Hardly," Poirot countered. "I do not think she has any friends." "Do you really think so? But why, Monsieur Poirot?" "It is merely a suggestion of mine." "Tell me, have you any more, what do you call them, points?" "Nothing directly connected with the case. It seems Miss Barrowby had been making some rather fishy moves with her stocks lately, and apparently lost a considerable sum. It looks a bit shady, but I don't see the connection with the main business. At least, not yet." "You're probably right. Well, it was very kind of you to call. I'm most obliged." "Don't mention it. I'm a man of my word, and I can see this business has gripped you. Besides, I'm very much hoping for your help. I should be delighted to assist you. What if I were to find a friend for this girl, for instance? Would that be of any use to you?" "I thought you said she hadn't any friends," said Inspector Sims in surprise. "I was mistaken. She has one friend," said Hercule Poirot, and replaced the receiver before the inspector could ask the next question. With a preoccupied air, Poirot entered the room where Miss Lemon sat at her typewriter. Seeing Poirot, she took her hands from the keys and looked at him questioningly. "I want you," he said, "to imagine a little story." Miss Lemon obediently folded her hands in her lap. She liked typing, paying bills, filing documents, and fixing dates for business appointments. Requests to imagine a hypothetical situation bored her unutterably, but she accepted it as a tiresome but necessary part of her duties. "Imagine," Poirot began, "that you are a Russian girl." "Yes," said Miss Lemon, her whole manner emphasizing her sturdy British origin. "You are alone in this country, without friends. You have reasons why you do not wish to return to Russia. You are in service to an old lady. Your work is rather hard and monotonous, a sort of nurse companion. You are meek and uncomplaining." "Yes," Miss Lemon repeated dutifully, though she was quite unable to imagine herself in the role of a meek and uncomplaining girl. There was no old lady in existence whose whims she would have tolerated. "The old lady has taken a fancy to you," Poirot continued. "She decides to leave you a legacy and tells you so." Poirot paused for a moment. "Yes," Miss Lemon said again, in the tone of a martyr. "And then the old lady discovers something, perhaps something to do with money. Perhaps she finds out that you have not been quite honest with her. Or, worse still, she thinks her medicine has a strange taste, or she does not like her food. At any rate, She begins to suspect you of something and writes a letter to a very famous detective. Why, let's say the most famous detective of all, myself. I am to visit her shortly. Then the whole thing will come out. Action must be taken at once. And so, before the famous detective arrives, the old lady is sent to the next world, and the money comes to you. Tell me, do you think such a thing is possible? Quite, said Miss Lemon. That is to say, quite possible for a Russian. Personally, I would never be a companion. I prefer my duties to be clearly defined, and certainly it would never occur to me to murder anyone. Poirot sighed. How I miss my friend Hastings. He had such a vivid imagination, such a romantic turn of mind. True, his surmises were usually incorrect, but they gave me a fillip, an impetus. Miss Lemon remained silent. She had heard of Captain Hastings many times before, but he was of no interest to her. She looked longingly at the sheet of paper in her typewriter with its unfinished text. So, it seems possible to you, Poirot said thoughtfully. Does it not seem so to you? I'm almost afraid that it does, Poirot sighed. The telephone rang. Miss Lemon left the room and returned almost immediately. It is Inspector Sims again, she said. Poirot hurried to the phone. Hello, yes. What is it you say? Sims repeated. I've just had a report. A packet of strychnine was found in the girl's bedroom, under the mattress. I think that settles the matter. Yes, said Poirot. I think that undoubtedly settles the matter. The tone of Poirot's voice changed. A sudden confidence appeared in it. Hanging up the receiver, he sat at his desk and began mechanically rearranging the objects lying upon it. There was something there, he murmured. I felt it. No, I did not feel it. I saw something. Come now, my little gray cells. To work. Think, reflect. Was everything I saw in proper order? And was it all logical? The girl, her anxiety over the money. Madame Delafontaine, Mr. Delafontaine, his hint about Bolsheviks. Stupid, of course, but then he is indeed a stupid man. The room, the garden. Ah, yes, the garden. For a while, Poirot sat perfectly still. Then a green light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly jumped up and hurried into the next room. Miss Lemon, would you be so kind as to put aside your work and conduct a little investigation for me? An investigation, Monsieur Poirot? I fear I am not quite suitable. You once said, Poirot interrupted her, that you know everything there is to know about tradesmen. Naturally I do. In that case, this will be simple for you. You will go to Charman's Green and find the fishmonger. The fishmonger? Miss Lemon asked in surprise. Precisely. The one who supplies fish to Rosebank. When you find him, ask him this question. Poirot handed her a slip of paper. Miss Lemon took it, read it with interest, and with a nod, put the cover over her typewriter. We shall go to Charman's Green together, said Poirot. You to the fishmonger, and I to the police station. I expect it will not take us long. At the station, Poirot was met by a surprised Inspector Sims. Well, well, where did you spring from, Monsieur Poirot? We only just spoke on the phone. I have a request. Will you allow me to see this girl? Katrina, what is her surname? Ryger. Katrina Ryger. Very well, I have no objection. Katrina looked even paler and more somber than when Poirot had last seen her. Mademoiselle, he began gently, I want you to trust me and tell me the truth. The girl looked at him defiantly. I have told the truth. I have told everyone the truth. Someone may have poisoned the old lady, but it was not I. It is a mistake. You all want to keep the money from me. Her voice was harsh, and she reminded Poirot of a pathetic little rat driven into a corner. Tell me about the powders, mademoiselle, Poirot continued. Did no one but you touch them? I have already said, I brought them from the chemist that same day. I called for them just before dinner. I opened the box and gave Miss Barrowby one packet and a glass of water. And no one but you touched them? No. A little cornered rat, but a very brave rat. And Miss Barrowby ate only what we were told at dinner. The soup, the fish, the tart. Yes. A hopeless yes. And dark, smoldering eyes full of hatred that saw no light ahead. Poirot patted her on the shoulder. Courage, mademoiselle. Freedom lies ahead of you. And money, yes, yes. And a life of comfort. The girl looked at him incredulously. When Poirot came out, Inspector Sims asked unexpectedly, I didn't quite follow. When you spoke to me on the phone, did you say the girl had a friend? She certainly has. It is I. And before the inspector could realize what was happening, Poirot headed for the door. Poirot met Miss Lemon at the Green Cat tea room. She did not keep him waiting, but went straight to the point. His name is Ridge, of High Street, and you were perfectly right. Exactly a dozen and a half. I've written down everything he said. Miss Lemon handed him a note. Hercule Poirot's eyes twinkled, and he made a strange sound, like the purr of a contented cat. Hercule Poirot set off for Rosebank. Entering the gate, he paused, looking at the garden. The sun was setting. Mary Delafontaine opened the door. Monsieur Poirot, she said in surprise. You have returned? Yes, I have returned. He paused for a moment. Madam, when I first saw your garden, a nursery rhyme came to my mind about Mistress Mary's garden, where silver bells and cockle shells grow. Only your shells are unusual, are they not, madam? They are oyster shells, said Poirot, pointing to the flower bed. He heard her catch her breath sharply. A question froze in her eyes. Poirot nodded. Mais oui, I know. The maid left you a dinner already prepared because it was her night off, and you ate only what she had cooked. The maid and Katrina will confirm that. Only you and your husband know that you also brought home a dozen and a half oysters. A little treat pour la bonne tante. It is so easy to slip strychnine into an oyster, and an oyster is so easy to swallow. But there remain the shells. One cannot throw them into the dustbin. The maid would see them, and so you found a way to use them as an edging for the flower bed. But there were clearly not enough shells. The row remained unfinished, which disturbed the symmetry of your charming garden. These oyster shells were an obvious false note. They struck me at once. Was it because of the letter that you guessed? Asked Mary Delafontaine. I knew it had been written, but naturally I could not have known how much she had confided in you. At any rate, Poirot replied evasively, I knew that the matter was a family one. Had it concerned Katrina, there would have been no need for your aunt to keep it so secret. As I understand it, you had been using Miss Barrowby's securities for your own purposes, and she found you out. Mary nodded affirmatively. We had done it more than once. A little here, a little there. I never thought she would have the wit to discover it. And then I learned she had sent for a detective, and that she was leaving all her money to Katrina, to that miserable creature. And so the empty packet of strychnine found its way into Katrina's bedroom. I see. You feared I would discover everything, and to save yourself and your husband, you attempted to frame an innocent girl. You are very cruel, madam. Mary Delafontaine shrugged her shoulders. Her eyes, as blue as forget-me-nots, stared directly at Poirot. He remembered how superbly she had played her part when he first arrived at her house, and how she had cut short her husband's clumsy attempts to intervene. A remarkable woman, but utterly ruthless. Pity? She said. For that insignificant little rat? For that unscrupulous schemer? Her voice was thick with contempt. I believe, madam, Poirot said slowly, that in your life you have had only two devotions. One is your husband. He noticed a slight tremor of her lips. "The other is your garden." Poirot looked around him. It seemed as though he were asking forgiveness from the flowers for what he had already done and for what he was yet to do.